All right, so before we close up the outsides, I'll go ahead and trim off a little bit of this excess. So we'll trim the whole piece. The way that this was done by the previous upholsterer is all they did was put the Dacron here and then put their fabric over that. I was taught by the upholsterer that I worked for to put, before you put the Dacron, he always took either a leftover piece of fabric or muslin or any tightly woven leftover fabric. He would always staple a piece of that onto this just to hold all this in, I guess. And then he would put a fresh layer of Dacron over the top of that, almost to the edge, just enough. He would leave just enough space in between the Dacron and the staple edge so that you could put your staples in there without hitting the Dacron, because he said you should never staple into your Dacron. But since this is already here and it was already like this, I'm gonna leave it as is and just staple this down and go with it. So I have the arrow up. This is the up. Oh, I feel like I need to put a new layer of Dacron on here because it looks lumpy. This is lumpy. Well, maybe if I staple that down better. So I learned how to upholster from a night school in St. Petersburg. There was a really great teacher at the night school that I went to. She was a great teacher. However, she didn't really let you do everything. Like I said, she would do all the cuts for everybody, and the class was really slow moving. For me anyway, because I already knew how to sew and I had experience slip covering. After I did that, and I took the upholstery class because I just wanted to be able to do my own pieces, my own upholstery. And then shortly after that, my good friend whose husband had an upholstery shop for years and years, he was the best upholsterer in town for sure. He needed some help. I think one of his guys quit or something. They asked me if I would be willing to come and help and work in his shop for part-time. So I did that. I worked in his shop like 8 to 12, Monday through Friday, while my kids were in school. I learned a ton from him. I was basically a tear-off girl. So I watched him cut fabric and he gave me all kinds of pointers, but the only thing I really did mostly was tear off. I did a little bit. He cut all the fabric, so he cut all the pieces, and then on easier pieces, he let me attach the pieces. But he was such a great upholsterer. He worked for a lot of interior designers and did some almost all high-end stuff. So the fabric that he was working with was always very expensive. And I remember this one time I was doing it was like just a French chair seat, and that was it. And the designer had given him, I think, 2 yards of fabric, so the fabric was super limited. And he was letting me attach it to the seat, and I made a relief cut into it to go around the back of the chair, and boy, I cut that relief cut a little bit too deep, and I knew it immediately. I was in tears. He wasn't even in the shop because he had to run out and get some supply, and the seamstress was like, "Don't worry about it, he'll fix it. But I was in tears, just beside myself, because there was no more fabric. So anyway, he came back and he did fix it. He made that fabric stretch somehow. Anyway, so that's how I learned how to do upholstery. So I'm just gonna make sure that I've got this on straight and I've got enough all the way around, and I'm gonna put one staple in the top here. Just about stapled into the decorative wood right there. Just feeling my way along the top of the frame. You can feel where take that one out. So this staple I put too far in, and it will be clearly outside of the welt. So I just So as I'm pulling, I'm sort of pulling back and down at the same time. So this outside leg, we're going to put a relief cut right up to the bottom. Then I'm going to cut off a little bit of this. And then this gets folded up and pulled nice and tight and stapled around the back. And then this goes like that. And we'll cut that off, and of course the cambric will hold that up. So that's how you do, and now we'll come around the back. Alright, so next I'll show you how to clean this up. Okay, so the next step is to clean all this up and cut it. So the best thing is a very sharp razor blade. An X-Acto knife would be great, but you'll need a couple blades for your X-Acto knife because they go dull pretty quick. If you are going to be doing this a lot, you would want to get yourself a sharpening stone so you could just keep sharpening these. Okay, so the idea is to cut this fabric off right underneath the edge of the groove, you know, where your decorative wood ends. And just being very careful to not cut below any of your staples or right at any of your staples. So you've just got to feel your way across. And not hit your staples or any of your wood. So you just have to be careful. So you want to use good pressure, but not so much that it's dangerous. My blade's already kind of dull. You just cut that off, and now after I put the back on, then I will make some double welt, and I'll put double welt all the way around this. And then after that, we'll put the dust cover back on. Okay, last piece is the very back. And I'll show you how to close up the sides with the tack strip. But the top will just staple on, the bottom will staple on, and we'll close up the sides with the tack strip. So we'll staple all the way down to almost the edges, and then we'll put the tack strip in. So you would think that you would just run that edge right here close to this edge, but there's no way to cut that exactly right, so can't do that. You've got to just leave extra and then cut off. Allowing me to do that. So it'd probably be a good idea to pin this to make sure that it's nice and straight, but I won't be doing that. Oh, I forgot to say, I did put on a new piece of Dacron across the whole back because the piece that was back there was coming apart, so I did do that. Okay, so cut a little bit of that off. We don't want Dacron poking out from our seam, so we'll cut this back a little ways. You want your Dacron to be about 3/4 of an inch away from the edge. First of all, we want to straighten out the tack strip. This is the pokey kind. And the other thing we want to do is straighten out our prongs so they're all 90 degrees angle from the back part of it. I'll come in one more. Okay, one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this down so it's about an inch and a half away, so we don't have so much fabric to tuck in. Maybe that's 2 inches. It's probably better closer to 2 inches. Okay, so then we're going to put this like right next to the edge of the sofa and make sure that the top is down below the decorative part there, and we're gonna stretch the fabric just a little bit and poke it on there. Keep that tack strip right next to the sofa. I've got all those little pokey things poked through, and now what we're going to do is fold it over and we pull it. Now I've got to find my mallet. Okay, so back to it. I'm going to pull this metal tack strip all the way to the edge of the sofa, and then generally you would use a mallet for this, but I cannot find my mallet, so I wrapped my hammer in fabric, and that's what I'm using. So we'll see how this works. And you want to just tap them in partially until you get a little farther down and get them all in. So that you can go and pull as hard as you can to the edge of your piece so that the tack strip comes right to the edge. Okay. Now that I've got it all in, I can go ahead and hammer it all in. That one. Oh, that top one, I gotta take this out because, oh, that broke off in there. Okay, that's all right, because what I can do is just staple right here. And that'll keep that closed up. So this is where the one came out. So what I think I'll do right here, it's stapled up here. I don't know, maybe I can just sew it right here. It's because this welt will end here and this welt will end here. So maybe I'll just sew this right here to hold it in nice and tight. But you see how nice and tight that is? Now I'll put the staples here. So the second to last step after you trim off all the edges of your upholstery is to attach your welt cord, your double welt cord. So here's my double welt cord. I have a separate video for how to make double welt cord, so I'm not gonna show you how to do that here. I'll link to that video right here. What you're gonna do is grab out your hot glue gun. We're just gonna glue it all on. So that's pretty much all there is to it. So you'll still need your staple gun because we're gonna staple it underneath here, and then we're gonna run it up here, and when you glue it, you want to push it right into that crevice there, and then here, and then we're going to go up this inside of the arm, across here, across the back, back down this side, down here, here, and then staple it under here. And then we're going to do the same thing on the outside. From the bottom, we'll staple here, go up, across, and then I think I'm gonna dead end it in the back there because it meets kind of like this, and then I'll do a separate piece across the back. I'm use my you can use your regulator or your flathead to push that in to that crevice. All right, so I'm going to show you this corner and how you do that. And if you had a bigger glue gun, it would be great. I'm just going to put the hot glue up to the corner and kind of bend it. Let's push that welt down in there. All right, now I'm going to push that into the corner so that we get it right into the corner. Okay, now I'll put some glue in the corner and up this side. And I'll use this to push it down and into the corner. And I'm going to get this into the corner. Okay, so there's one last little detail before closing up the bottom, and that is to put tack strip, cardboard tack strip, along the bottom welt. So on the bottom, you just put in one single welt, not a double welt, and we're gonna put tack strip on here because this is loose. And no matter how close you staple to the edge of the sofa, which you don't really want to do because you're liable to staple off the edge and have a staple coming up, the welt doesn't stay nice and tight. So we've got to add tack strip to this. And what that does is keeps this part stable. So we're going to put this right up on top of the welt, just above the stitch line of the welt. We're going to staple that in. Now for this, you're going to want to use a little bit longer staple because it's got to go through the cardboard, 2 layers of the welt, your upholstery fabric. Okay, now that holds that welt on there as sturdy as can be. So we're going to do that all the way around. Then we're going to close this up with the cambric. And that's all there is to it. So if you want to see the video on how I tore off the upholstery, go ahead and click that video right here. If you want to see the next video on how to make the double welt, then click right here.